Howdy. So you probably remember about a few days ago I went through all of my Wii games for like something that I called a filler week. It's not a week, it's not... I have no idea why I called it a filler week. It's just a bunch of miscellaneous stuff I thought I'd do. Like, instead of my usual comic book reviews, comic book haul videos, because I haven't been getting any books. So yeah. So today, got another collection video for you guys. This time, it's probably going to be a bit longer, or a lot longer. It's got probably double the games. But that's for my PlayStation 2. So without further ado, start this off. Bionicle Heroes. This game was 50p. I have no idea why it wasn't more expensive. It's actually a really decent game. It's a third-person shooter. It's a third-person shooter, and like you can. It's the level structure, and it's the structure of a normal Lego game where you go around collecting like these Lego studs or Lego things. Here it's like the parts that build up like your Bionicle sets, and collect enough, become gold, become invincible. You know, every attack kills an enemy in one hit. The only problem with the game is that it's a bit too easy. It's a bit too easy, and some of the levels can be a bit confusing. With the layout of the levels can be a bit confusing, but it's a decent game. It's a fun time. It's a long game as well. It's around 12-13 hours. So it's pretty long. Next one's Colin McRae Racing, and it's the only racing game that I own that's not Mario Kart. So yeah, it's pretty good. I prefer rally races than, you know, your stereotypical street races. Not really a big fan of like the Need for Speed franchise. Then they made a film off of it, which is a bit more like Too Slow, Too Steady. But yeah, Colin McRae Rally is probably one of the best like racing games, or one of the best rally games you can play, at least for the PS2 anyway. Next up is Dead or Alive 2, a game that's known for having, at least at the time, realistic like physics on the characters. So yeah, the game was also 50p. It's a really good fighting game, although it's a bit shallow on content. There's like the time trials and the actual like campaign. It's like half an hour per character. There's only 10 characters, so it's like 5 hours. Yeah. Disney's Dinosaur is the worst abomination I have ever put into my PS2. I've only played the first level because I'm not going any further on that. It's just an abysmal game. But the only reason why I have this is because the film was my childhood. The film was what I grew up watching. But the game just pisses on my memory of the film. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3, the only Budokai game that I own, and it's it's really good. It's a really good fighter. Campaign is really good as well. It's really well rounded. It's more complex than I thought it would be as well, and it's just great how like the whole game basically goes through like the entirety of the Dragon Ball Z universe from beginning to end. And it's basically the whole anime just in one game. So if you want the story of the anime but don't want to watch like over 300 episodes of Dragon Ball Z, then just pick up the game. There's a lot less filler. Let's just say, and there's not an episode of Goku learning to drive as well. Final Fantasy X was my first Final Fantasy game. I only owned 3, and this one, 12, and 15, the newest one. But this is by far my favourite. It's the classic turn-based, like RPG style. It's the first Final Fantasy game that actually had like voice acted cutscenes, and the game keeps going back and forth between the CG cutscenes and the in-game cutscenes, which would be annoying if it were any other game, and if the CG didn't look as beautiful as it does in this. So yeah. Final Fantasy XII had a promising beginning. It's just the combat system I am not a big fan of. It goes away with the whole turn-based stuff, and it goes more on the line of an action RPG. But you just click a button that says attack, and just stand there waiting, not doing anything, while your character's slashing at whatever enemy it's attacking. It would be good if there was a bit more player input, and if there wasn't so much stuff that you had to do before you're able to attack anything. So basically there's a system where you have to learn everything before. So you have to learn how to put on armor before you can put on armor. You have to learn how to cast spells before you can actually cast that spell, which makes sense, but it's a bit, do you really need this in a game? So yeah, it's a bit annoying. Forgotten Realms Demon Stone is a decent time waster that is good for the first few levels, but the difficulty curve really ramps up like about halfway through the game. And there's this one level where you have to like keep on going back and forth to this fire pit to put your sword on fire, but when you already have like the enchantments on your weapons that give your sword give you like a flame sword, it turns it off anyway at the beginning of the level, which is kind of annoying. It should be that if you already have the fire sword equipped, then you should be able to keep it for the level. You shouldn't have it switched off just so you can like play this awkward mechanic. But yeah, the game's good for the first half, a bit too difficult for the second half, and a bit too cheap. But yeah, there's not much content. There's only 10 levels, bear in mind the levels are like 10 minutes for the first half and about like an hour to 2 hours for the second half, but still elongating your levels and making them harder just so someone can sink more time into the game. Just add more content. Just put more levels in, or if you don't want to put that many levels in, make it an open world game. If this were to be, if someone were to make a game like this, like now, they would, I'd say, go the Devil May Cry route. Not the new reboot, the old Devil May Cry games, where it's more action oriented, and yeah, it's more action oriented instead of all the walking around and kind of just boring, monotonous stuff and a massive difficulty curve at the middle of the game. Next up is Genji. Genji is what this should have been. Genji is just amazing. It's just an amazing game. You can play as either one of these two characters. I always choose this guy. He does the most damage. Also, when that is your first boss, you know the game's going to be good. So yeah, it's just fun, fast-paced action, set in China. No, set in Japan. And yeah, it's just really good. The only problem that I have is that they give every character like a Japanese accent, and I wouldn't have a problem with that normally, apart from the fact when they say that one character is American and they still have a Japanese accent for the American character. So it's a bit jarring when they say, I'm American, but it's a Japanese accent coming out. Next is The Incredible Hulk, based on the 2008 movie. The game's decent, it's fun, it's kind of a clone of the Hulk Ultimate Destruction, which I also own. It's just this is a slightly more flawed version. It's not as bad as some other movie games. It's definitely not as bad as the other games in the MCU lineup of bad movie games like Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, and so on and so forth. This is definitely the best of the MCU games. But then again, it's based off of one of the worst movies in the MCU. Go figure. I wouldn't say that the game is better than the film, because there are still a lot of like glitches and stuff that happens. Like, you'll be running, but the game still thinks that you're on like a flat plane. So when there's like an up curve in the terrain, you will just run through it instead of over it, which is funny to watch, but just shows that the game's not finished. However, Hulk Ultimate Destruction, which came out 2 years beforehand, is a lot better. Go figure, the older game is better than the newer one, and has less performance issues, less problems, and looks a lot better. But the plot of the game, the plot of the two games is practically identical. Bruce Banner is being chased by someone called Emil Blonsky, who is the Abomination. It's just that this time, the Abomination and his plan is a lot bigger and not restricted by the film. There's a lot more depth to the characters, and it's a bit weirder how the game based on an original story has a better plot than the one based on the film. I guess that's usually how it goes. Next up is The Incredibles: Rise of the Underminer. Don't have the first game because the first game was terrible. This one's a lot better, apart from the fact that it's 2 hours and it's called The Incredibles, even though you only play as Mr. Incredible and Frozone throughout the whole 2 hours of the game. The whole 2 hours is set underground, so the color palette is brown through all of the levels apart from one ice level, and there's a lot of level hazards, and by a lot I mean fire, just a lot of fire, maybe some falling boulders, but just fire. The enemies, the enemy variety, there's just not enough. The game definitely would have been better if it was longer, if it tried to do more with what it had, because it was basically based off of what would have happened next after the film cuts off and the Underminer is just like, I am the Underminer, I am always beneath you, but you are never beneath me, when he's standing above everyone else. So he's technically above everyone else and everyone's below him. And he's saying how no one's beneath him. I always found that funny. Next up is Kingdom Hearts 1. This game it's the weirdest concept, because it's Final Fantasy characters with Disney characters and put in Disney worlds. But it works so well that the franchise is still going today, and the third game is actually coming out this year. I'm so hyped for that. You can't imagine how hype I am for that. Especially since the second game is my favourite game of all time. But yeah, this is still good. It's just the concept. The concept is actually better than the execution. The execution for this is still not really there. It's not polished as much. They don't go into as much depth in the worlds. Some of the worlds are very some of the worlds are downright terrible, like Deep Jungle, and there's a section in Deep Jungle which is based off Tarzan where you have to jump on hippos, and because the platforms are so small and the platforming in Kingdom Hearts is bad anyway, it's just a nightmare, and that whole world took me 3 hours to beat. Yeah. Next is Kingdom Hearts 2, my favourite game of all time. This is the best thing. It may not be the best game, it may not be the best thing ever made, but it's such a charming game. Maybe it goes a bit too serious with the plot. Maybe it's not as in-depth as it should have been. Maybe the worlds needed to be a bit longer, but that's why you visit them twice. Maybe the gameplay isn't as in-depth as the first one, but it's kind of a bit more in-depth. Maybe it's a bit monotonous having to press the triangle button for everything. I didn't find that. I got used to having every reaction command be the triangle button, but it's just the story of the game is so good, and it meshes so well with everything else, and every choice that the character makes, and every choice that every character makes, there are scenes in this game that will go down in history as some of the best things that have ever happened in video games ever. Like, there's a part where you fight 1,000 enemies at once, and it's not like, oh, it's just fluff enemies. Like, you can die in that section, like, several times, because you usually think, oh, you're fighting 1,000 enemies. It's gonna be like the basic nukes, but no. And the game's not as difficult as the first one. It's twice the length, and there's a lot more stuff to do. There's a lot more worlds, and like I said, you visit each world twice, and the villains, the Organization 13, they're very interesting characters, or at least like the ones that are actually given more time are interesting characters. But yeah, it's just my favourite game of all time. If not the only reason being, it's the only game that's actually made me cry. Like, or yeah, it was the only game that's made me cry. It's just such a good game, such a good experience to play it as well. Next is Marvel Ultimate Alliance. At the time, this probably would have been a great game, but now it just seems a bit dated, and there's a lot of places in the game where I think they could have done a bit more. But basically, the concept is the world is under attack by Doctor Doom again. So all of the Marvel superheroes that were popular at the time in the comics basically banded together, and they have to fight Doom. And for some reason, some of the popular characters in this game include Luke Cage, Blade, Ghost Rider, the Fantastic Four, Iceman, Daredevil. I'm not saying that Daredevil isn't a great character. He's my favourite superhero, but he wasn't really popular at the time. Black Panther wasn't popular at the time. It's popular now because of big budget blockbuster film that's groundbreaking in every way, apart from it's kind of a bit of a mess, and no one is willing to say that it's kind of a bit of a mess. But yeah, and the big marketing of this is Spider-Man. But if you're gonna have people to fight a god, then of course you're gonna choose Elektra to fight a god. Why not? Why wouldn't you? You know, why wouldn't you get Blade to fight Doctor Doom? Why wouldn't you get Iceman? I know that it's called Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and it's supposed to be a combination of everything in the Marvel Universe. But it's also a bit bullshit that they have a level where you talk to Bruce Banner, but the Hulk isn't a playable character. And it's not like they weren't afraid to do big build characters, because the Thing is a playable character, but the Hulk isn't. Or at least the Hulk is DLC in the PS3, Xbox 360 version, and he's pretty much in the game from the get-go in the PS4 version. But I don't understand why he's not a playable character in every version. He's one of the most popular characters in the Marvel lineup. And at the time he was popular as well, because he had that Lou Ferrigno series, he had the 2003 movie, which was pretty bad, But yeah, and when I said wasted potential earlier, what I mean by that is there is a boss fight against Galactus, Eater of Worlds, probably the most powerful villain in the Marvel Universe. Should probably be the villain of Avengers 4, if Fox makes that deal. But yeah, we see at the back of the box, we've got everyone attacking it. That's not what happens in the game. The game, the boss fight is actually 3 panels, then do a quick time event with Silver Surfer, repeat it 3 times, Bob's your uncle. And that's what I mean by wasted potential. A lot of the big enemies, or like the bigger boss fights, are just reduced to wait around for a while, quick time event. Wait around for a while, quick time event. Which is kind of annoying. Next up is Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. Now, the Lord of the Rings games are unanimously known as some of the best licensed games, and this is no exception. It's a great game. It is just a really good game. The first level is the Battle of Helm's Deep. You know, when the first level, the opening level, is the Battle of Helm's Deep. You're playing as Gandalf. Like, the first thing you do in the whole game is whack an orc in the face with Sir Ian McKellen. You know you're in for a great game. Next up is Over the Hedge. You probably think with a game like Over the Hedge, based off of an average animated movie, it'd probably be an average licensed game, or a crap licensed game. No, it's perfectly good, because the first half an hour is based on the ending of Over the Hedge, where it's the chase scene with the bear and the thing, the main villain of the movie. And then after that, it's what would happen after the film. When the film's done, what would happen next. And I always like it when games do that, when games tell the plot of what would happen when the movie's finished. So yeah, really like this. It's just a fun game. It's a bit repetitive. There's not a lot of stuff that you can actually do in the game apart from beat the main story. But yeah. Next is Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. The game is fun. It's good, apart from the fact that there's only one boss fight. That's the final boss, and it's confusing as hell. You don't know what you're doing, and everything else. But yeah. And it's also kind of charming how every time you die, like the voiceover of the character telling the story is basically like, no, that's not what happened. It's just a really British voice that's trying to play an Arabian guy. It's a really British voice that doesn't go with the Prince of Persia. So for some reason everyone is British, but the game is set in but everyone's supposed to be Arabian, but they're given British voice actors that don't put on like an Arabian accent. which is off-putting, to say the least. But the game is fun up until you get to the final boss, and it's confusing as all hell. You don't know what you're doing. But yeah, it's a decent game. Next up is Robots. I've only gotten about an hour into this game, and it's fun. It's basically just Ratchet and Clank, but with the main character from Robots. So yeah, it's a relatively fun licensed game. Next up is Scooby-Doo Mystery Mayhem. The game is pretty good. As a whole, it's just your average game, but there's two sections in particular that really get on my nerves. It's one section where you're on a minecart, and it's just the most horrid, disgusting, terrible thing ever, because it's supposed to be fast, but there's a 5-second delay on every input that you do, because the rest of the game is so slow, methodical, and like you really need to think about everything else in the game. But then you've got these two other sections that are really fast-paced and pedantic, that you're not really ready for it. And plus they're just hard as balls. And I never thought I'd be complaining about the difficulty of a game that's rated 3+, and the main character is a talking dog. Well, I've got two Scooby-Doo games. Next is Scooby-Doo Unmasked. It's practically just Sly Cooper, but with Scooby-Doo slapped onto it. Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's just a pretty fun action platformer with stealth sections, which is exactly what a Scooby-Doo game should be. Simpsons Hit and Run. Oh my god, this is just amazing, because it's Grand Theft Auto, but with the Simpsons characters. It's GTA with Simpsons characters. And I never thought that I would want GTA with Simpsons characters, but that's exactly what this is, and it's beautiful. It's one of the best underrated gems of the PS2, and it's one of the most underrated licensed games as well. Next is Spider-Man. It's another average licensed game. It's good. It's short. The other Spider-Man 2 is better. Spider-Man 3 is worse. It's kind of like in the middle of the road as Spider-Man games are concerned. SpongeBob SquarePants, the movie, the game. But is it the movie or is it the game? No, it's the game. There's just an undeniable amount of charm that comes with anything that has that sponge on it. It's just an undeniable amount of charm that has it. And you wouldn't expect a good game out of SpongeBob. You really wouldn't. There's just nothing really there. But they somehow manage to take such a out there like premise and character and make a really good game out of it. Of course, it's based off of the plot of the film. There's nothing really added there, but it's really fun. Like the driving levels are fun. there are levels where you're literally just like licking the ground, and that's like how you're maneuvering, which is really fun. The boss fights are fun. There's this one boss fight where it's set on the back of David Hasselhoff, which is amazing. And that was my favourite part of the film, where David Hasselhoff just comes in and he's like, ride my back, and the main villain, and one of the main villains is just stabbing him in the bum. Like, that's one of my favourite parts of the film. It's my favourite level in the game. Next is Tekken Tag Tournament. This is a really good fighting game. It's just a really well put together fighting game. XMen 3, the official movie game, and it's got about as much quality in it as the film. And if you aren't aware of the film, XMen 3, The Last Stand, just drop the box. Not that I really care, because it's a crap game anyway. But yeah, it's basically got as much thought put into it as, well, as anything else. This game is bad. It's boring, monotonous, terrible. The boss fights are atrocious. The reason why I'm so like angry with this game in particular is because it takes place in between XMen 2 and XMen 3. Yet it's titled XMen The Last Stand, even though it takes place before the movie even happens. And the main plot has nothing to do with the actual third movie. It's more a continuation of the second. Magneto's nowhere to be seen. There's 3 playable characters: Iceman, Wolverine. Of course, Wolverine's a playable character. The X-Men trilogy was basically Wolverine and his amazing friends, or subpar average friends, and Nightcrawler, my favourite of the X-Men. And Nightcrawler's levels are the only ones that are actually interesting, because you've got Wolverine, who's slow and handles like a truck. You've got Iceman, who's way too fast for his own good and just an uncontrollable mess. Then you've got Nightcrawler, who is actually really fun to play as, but can't take a hit for shit. And then there's 2 other characters that aren't playable but will help you out. That's Storm and Colossus. Yeah, who remembers Colossus from the original X-Men trilogy? He's basically, oh, he was the big guy from Deadpool. Yeah. So, yeah. And the game, the first half is continuing from X-Men 2. The second half is, oh look, Sentinels exist, and Silver Samurai. When was Silver Samurai ever mentioned in the X-Men trilogy? And the final boss is Mephisto. You know, the Doctor Strange Ghost Rider villain that has nothing to do with the X-Men in any way possible. Only that he's the devil and Nightcrawler is religious. That's the only reason that he's in the game. The game makes no sense, is what I'm saying. And there's, of course, there's a lot worse games out there, but it just annoys me how the game makes no sense. It makes even less sense than the ending of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The game, I mean, the film kind of, the film was an apt ending, you know, and end on a cliffhanger that's never going to be resolved because now Marvel owns the character and made a superior film in every way. Pun definitely intended. If you get that pun, in the comments below. You know, and if you don't get that pun, no, I don't blame you. XMen Legends, XMen Legends 2. This is how you do an X-Men game. It's pretty much like Marvel Ultimate Alliance, but less characters, meaning there's less stuff that can go wrong. Every character is useful, apart from Jubilee. Every character has that possibility to be the best character in the game. That was a lie. There's only one best character in the game, and that's Jean Grey, because she's overpowered as shit. But yeah. It's amazing how even though there are some X-Men that are, I mean, the second game is better at showing how every character is equal, and yeah, but this, it's like, if you shit in the comics, you shit in the game. If you're overpowered in the comics, then oh my god, you will kill everything in the game. And then there's Wolverine, who's just, really, you shouldn't be that useful. You have claws that are you have tiny claws, and oh look at you, you can heal. But just because, oh my god, everyone loves Wolverine because, oh my god, Hugh Jackman, he's so sexy. That's why Wolverine is so overpowered in everything. Because, what, you were played by Hugh Jackman? Give you the most powerful things in every game. It's kind of ridiculous how they somehow made some characters who should be more powerful, and they kind of nerfed them, like Rogue. She does amazing damage, but she's slow as hell. The same with Colossus. He does really good damage, but he's really slow. And then you've got characters like Jubilee, who's fast, but she does like 1 damage per hit. And then there's Scott Summers, who is just a really good all-round character. Then there's Jean Grey, who, oh my god, she kills everything with 1 hit. And that's when she's level 1. But out of all that, I beat the game with Nightcrawler. Because he's my favourite character, and I put the most time and effort into building him. The second game is a lot easier because every character is actually worth building, and the Brotherhood are playable because the main villain's Apocalypse, and everyone hates Apocalypse, so everyone comes together to fight Apocalypse. And then there's one section, or there's one particular part in the game where Sugar Man, there's a character called Sugar Man. Imagine MODOK, but if he didn't have the chair, and he had 4 arms, and he had one hand that was holding Mjolnir, and the other which was holding the ultimate Mjolnir, which is kind of an axe, just with like a hammer bit at the end. And he's the hardest boss in the game because he does double damage because he has 4 arms. But there's a part where his only line, it's the only thing that James Arnold Taylor had to get right. But he says Apocalypse in the funniest way possible. And I'll see if I can get a clip of it. but it's basically him just saying apocalypse, apocalypse. And it's just the funniest thing. But yeah, that's my PS2 collection. Took double the amount of time to do this as to do my Wii games, and that's saying something. It's really saying something. But yeah, got some good games, got some bad games, got some downright terrible games, and out of that I can pretty much say that I have no life. So yeah. And you know what the most horrendous thing about this whole video is? It's not the fact that I own Disney's Dinosaur. It's not the fact that I own 2 Scooby-Doo games. It's not the fact that I own the SpongeBob SquarePants movie game. It's not the fact that I like the SpongeBob SquarePants movie game. It's the fact that I listed them all in alphabetical order. And on that note, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. I'm doing the salute thing a bit too early. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Leave a comment section below. Hit the notification bell. Subscribe if you haven't already. I already said that before, but subscribe if you haven't already. Can't say that enough. And until then, I will see you guys in the next video, which will probably be tomorrow. And I have a delivery coming that I know I'm gonna love. Don't know if you guys are gonna love it. I know I'm gonna love it. So I will see you guys next video. Until then, to all are one, peace.